So, hi everyone. My name is Erwin Hess. I'm here with Senator Malcolm Augustine from the state of Maryland. So happy to have you here. And for those that don't know you, we just want to know a little bit about your journey, your upbringing, your educational pathway. So, I noticed you were born in Louisiana, you graduated high school from the state of New York, and you attended Harvard University. So, if you don't mind sharing a little bit about that journey with the audience.
Sure. Thank you so much, Erwin. It's really wonderful to get a chance to talk with you this morning. Basically, Erwin, my journey really does start in Louisiana, and it really has to do with the power of education. So, both of my parents were born and raised in Louisiana. On my mom's side, they are farmers. On my dad's side, my grandfather was a gardener, and my grandmother's a nurse's aide. They did not have very much formal education, but what they were really committed to was making sure that their kids did get that opportunity because they saw education as a way out. And that's how my parents met. They met in college at the University of Southwestern Louisiana, having gotten their degrees. They went on to continuing to pursue graduate degrees, which is what brought us north, which is what brought us to New York, which is really where I was raised, although I was born in Louisiana.
Hmm.
And that really is sort of the framework that I came from. They then instilled in me the importance of education and making sure that that was just a pathway forward to opportunity, which is what led me to Harvard. And that really is sort of like the basis of who I am and all the things that I've done thus far.
Wow. So then after Harvard, tell us a little bit about your professional journey, right? What was some of the first work experiences you had, and then how did you transition into government after that?
Sure. So while I was at Harvard, I did study government. I've always had an interest in the political space and how government can help people. And so it was always there for me, Irwin. But I did graduating, did go to New York, get my first job in banking, continue to pursue other career pathways, including working within my family. My family had a contract manufacturing business when I was growing up. So eventually I went back home and started working into the family's business of contract manufacturing in different roles, primarily on the sales and marketing side, which is what I continue to do today. Today, I do it as an independent consultant, helping people with their sales and marketing projects. And that's really been sort of my professional side of things in my professional journey. Now, some 15 years ago, I would say, or somewhere in that space, living here in Maryland, really loving where I am. My wife and I raising our family here. We thought about, this place. We love it so much, but we would like to see it do better.
Yeah.
And I decided that I was going to raise my hand and be able to use the skills that had been poured into me by my family as it related to my education and my upbringing, but also just my understanding of who I was and where I was from. I mean, they always brought me back to Louisiana to make sure that I never lost track of who I was or who my people were and where I was from. And so I felt like I could really bring those different worlds together. Obviously, I've been in a world of the high academic world and high business world, but I'm also just really very comfortable with anybody. And
Mm.
so I felt like that was just a chance for me to be able to bring that, never forget who I am or where I was from to this space where it's not always the case, Erwin. That's really how I got there. Now, there were different steps along the way, of course. You raise your hand, you decide you want to run. People told me no. I lost my first time, but I
Mm.
came back 4 years later and said, or I just didn't stop. I
Yeah.
just said, okay, I understand you all. I'm not from Maryland. I was born in Louisiana, raised in New York, so I get it. You guys want to see what I'm capable of? You'll watch. And I did. I did just that. I worked hard, continued to pour into this community that I love so much. And so the people of Prince George's County decided 4 years later that I was the right choice for the Maryland State Senate. And then they elected me, and I've been there now for 2 terms. I'm now heading into what will be my third term since I am now unopposed, even though now is an election year.
Could you talk a little bit about that? I've interviewed a few people in my life, and one that always stood out to me was a gentleman by the name of Jose Hernandez. He was the first Mexican American in space. And he
Mm.
tried to be an astronaut 11 times, and you're only allowed to apply once a year for NASA. He tried 11 times. So on his 12th try in 12 years, he finally got it. Could you talk a little bit about how you just mentioned the first election you lost? How do you bounce back from that? How do you keep going? Because some people, I think, they lose and they say, you know what, I tried, that's it, I give up, I move on, I'm going to try something else. How did you kind of muster up the energy to say, I'm going to keep going and try again, and I'm going to pivot and do this differently this time?
Well, what I will say is that fear really is something that stops a lot of us. I mean, there's just no question about it that the fear of failure is so very, very powerful. But what I will share with you, Erwin, is that when you really, really want something, just like that person who you mentioned that wanted to be an astronaut, you overcome those fears. You overcome that rejection. And that's what happened with me, Erwin. Like it felt terrible to lose, obviously, but I really felt like this was an opportunity for me to make a real contribution. I believed in myself. I had other people who believed in me as well. They felt like I was someone who really could make some real positive contributions. And so I just stayed positive. Now, I will share with you what happened after. The other thing is that people did also say to me after I lost that first election, folks who were involved came up and said, Malcolm, we really do think that you have something to contribute. We really do. How about you serve on, basically, it was a Democratic Central Committee. Why don't you become a part of that? Which is, generally speaking, an elected position, but I was appointed to that role. I said, of course, I want to serve. I want to be a part of this. And so those kinds of positive reinforcements along the way helped me. But there's no question it was very challenging. I mean, it is hard to sort of raise your hand and say, hey, listen, I think I'm the right person, and have people tell you, no, you're not. That's not the most comfortable of places to then though feel like, hey, I still believe in myself. I've got the other people who believe in me, and so I'm willing to come back and try again. And that's basically my story.
Nice. I think that's a great segue into how we met. And I'll briefly share with you a little bit of the background of how I found you and how then our journey took us on this path for the direct admission bill. So I started my role working in admissions over 15 years ago at the University of Maryland, worked at Johns Hopkins, worked at Georgetown, so worked at various admissions colleges and institutions. And I've always had this idea about how we can make a proactive, like direct admission bill or something where a student is told that they're in instead of students applying and waiting to hear back traditionally how we've done it for decades in the US. And from my personal journey, my experience, I'll briefly share, and I testified to this, but my high school counselor never really explained to me the pathways to college. And maybe rightfully so. I was completely on the wrong path, hung out with the wrong crowd, had pretty bad grades. And I didn't know that I could simply go to my local community college and enroll as long as I graduated high school. I had no idea that that existed. My counselor basically said you could either join the military, you could work with your dad as a carpenter. She never really once explained if you graduate, just pay $25 and enroll at Montgomery College or my local community college in Montgomery County. I simply drove to campus there one day in the summer when I graduated high school in 2005 and got out the car, asked the student, where's the office to like go to school here? And they pointed at the admissions office. I walked in, I stood in a line. I didn't even know what the line was for. I got to the front desk and the student worker there said, if you want to come here, like I said before, you just pay 25 bucks, you pick a major and you take a placement test. And I said, that's it? That was the big thing of college that was so far away from me and never mentioned to me, and that's all I need to do. And I remember that they printed a student ID, and I got it, and I got to take it home, and I told my mom and dad, I'm like, look, I'm in college. They're like, what do you mean you're in college? I was like, I don't know. This means I'm in college, and so I was so confused with the process. I had no idea how it worked. And I keep thinking to myself, 2 decades later, that there are still countless students out there that don't necessarily know the pathway and how it works sometimes. And even for like FAFSA or financial aid, I had no idea that I qualified for Pell Grants. I didn't know that I was eligible based off of my parents' income status. I ended up paying out of pocket my fall semester. And
Mhm.
when I found out about FAFSA in the spring semester, I applied and I retroactively got my money back for the fall. I got my spring covered and I got $1,000 check because of the balance that was left over from my like $5,500 Pell Grant to buy computer or books. I ended up taking that check back to that line that I went to in that office and said, "You guys sent me a check on accident." And they were like, "No, no, no, that's your Pell Grant. You're allowed to buy a computer or whatever you need with that." I was like, "What?" My mind was blown. I had no idea how this worked. I just kept navigating through it. So, long story short, I ended up, going to college, made something of myself, got 5 degrees, my two associates, bachelor's, master's, and a doctorate from Hopkins. All of that would have never happened had I not simply driven down to campus that day and asked how to go to school there. And I think about that a lot, actually. And that's what led me to my professional journey. It's what led me to create my company and Admissions Gambit and all these different things that I want to do by helping students figure out their pathway and how to help them move forward and their parents as well. And so the way that we were connected was I ended up Googling, does Maryland have direct admission? And the answer was no. But there was an article, I think at the Baltimore Sun or someone, where I saw that there was a senator, Malcolm Augustine, who attempted to pass a bill. And again, I think this is a great experience from the journey you just shared before, how you tried, you raised your hand, and you were told no at a certain time, and you kept going. I saw the article and it said, I think at the time there was trying to be class rankings introduced and different things and minimum criteria and all these other stuff. And I thought, I'm just going to email him to see if maybe I could give a suggestion, have a meeting. And I think to my next question is, I'm sure you get bombarded all the time with emails, phone calls. Can I get a minute? There's so many constituents, so many different factions, so many different ideas that are coming your way. How do you kind of manage what to prioritize and what to move forward with based off of your previous experience, what you've seen already in the Maryland State Senate, what you think would work, what doesn't work, or do you go for like really big ideas that maybe won't work, but you want to try and push forward? Tell me a little bit about the thought process that goes behind kind of cutting through all the noise and figuring out what are the things I'm going to prioritize.
Thank you, Erwin, and thank you for sharing the story. And just before I start talking about that, you as a student is really what the work that you and I have done together is all about to demonstrate to them what is possible. And I'm just really grateful for your help with that. The way that it happened for me is that there was basically the case that overruled affirmative action in college admissions, and I just had real concerns about making sure that all students had an opportunity to go experience what my family had experienced, the transformational opportunity of higher education. And I was just very, very concerned that those doors could be closed to students who were talented enough in order to do that. I also just had this belief that the talent is just equally distributed amongst society, but the opportunity was not equally distributed amongst society, and that it was our job as public servants to help to identify that talent and uplift that talent, even in those places where the opportunities weren't possibly there, and to allow for people to flourish in that way. And that's what the bill was all about. I mean, and I then did my homework, did my research to identify other places around the country that may have come up with ways to help to create pathways for students who have different backgrounds to be able to demonstrate that they have been successful where they are with what they have, and that we then reward that. That was what it was for me. It really was the genesis, though, of it was the affirmative action case and my deep concern that it was going to close the door to a lot of students who, again, have the talent, just not the opportunity. And that really was for me where it was. Now, but in keeping with what happened with me with my elections, when I pursued this with the University of Maryland, which is a selective school in our state, they really weren't too interested in this as a framework because they felt that their current admissions policy, a whole person admissions policy, would be able to still bring forward and identify the talent of students across the board in our state in the way that I felt was important by identifying by students who were able to achieve a certain rank in their class. Like basically, they're at the top of their class where they are, then they should be able to go to our flagship university. But that there was disagreement on that, Irwin. I mean, the University of Maryland College Park just did not think that the approach was an appropriate approach for a number of different reasons that we will not go into. So they said no. And I
Mm,
would say that to my colleagues sometimes. They'd be like, well, Malcolm, why are you willing to stop? I'm like, listen, you can't force these things,
mm,
right? Sometimes you can't force things. I put forward the best possible argument that why I believe in something, but it doesn't mean that it's going to happen. It doesn't. But it also doesn't mean that you stop. It
yeah,
also doesn't mean that you just stop listening or that you lose track of what was the essence of the concern that was there, which is how you and I were able to connect. Because you saw, like, you got to be flexible on these things in order to make progress. You said, hey, maybe there's a space here where we might be able to work together, common interests, common goals. And that's the take. And that's where, for me, you opened the door for me to a different avenue with regard to direct admissions that just simply made a lot of sense to me. And it is my job, Erwin, to sort of, my chief of staff, my legislative aide, I'll just, they do look at all of the emails that come in and they do decide these are, and what I share is that, okay, these are my interest areas. If you see people come into these interest areas, look at them, let's take a look, then send them forward to me. Let's assess, let's see what they are. And so we do have sort of this process where we are looking in interest areas based on past ideas and concepts that we've worked on to then be able to really take a look at those ideas that are out there because that's what we want to do. We want to get the ideas from people, and to be able to then be just the vessel, which is what I always say. For me, I am the vessel. I mean, if you want to get a piece of legislation passed in the state of Maryland, you have to have a sponsor. That sponsor must be a senator or a delegate.
yeah,
And that's the thing. We then are the vehicles to be able to do those things, and it's a talent that I have definitely worked on over the course of the last 8 years, which is to be able to understand how to compromise and how to move legislation forward. That's my job. That's the part that I do, but I really do depend on people like you to say, "Hey, listen, I've looked at this. This is where I am. Why not consider this as an opportunity for the people of our state?"
yeah. I think that's phenomenal. And I appreciate you a lot because I won't mention previous politicians that I worked with, but I've worked with some and they said, this is great. Please follow up. And I do, and I don't hear back. And so the fact that you did, kudos to you as well, your team. It means a lot. And because of that, now countless students in the state of Maryland are going to be impacted in such a positive way moving forward because you actually followed up and went through with it. Now, I do have a question about the behind the scenes, what happens once you follow up, once you draft the bill, how does it work to negotiate or maneuver with those that oppose a bill, right? So I know that in the past, like you mentioned with College Park, for example, an external constituent outside of the chamber said, no, we don't agree. And then maybe that influenced those within the chamber. How does it work when you're kind of there with Democrats, Republicans, and others that are thinking about this, but you don't want the bill to die. How do you make sure that you give and you take? And talk to us a little bit about that dance that goes back and forth.
Sure. So there's a variety of different things, and this just goes to the business of being a legislator. That's exactly what you're asking me about right now. There are a variety of constituent groups that you must work with and through in order to get something from an idea into a law in the state of Maryland. And the way that I think of it, Erwin, is that you have a number of gates that you have to be willing, or you have to figure out how to pass through in order to get to in order to pass a piece of legislation. I won't talk to you about sort of like the truly mechanical ones that are there because they are there. What I'll talk to you about is just the more of the conceptual ones that you do have to work through because that's what you sort of asked me about. So the first one and the first test that I always have is to receive a idea, understand a problem, and then understand what the proposed solution is to really be able to really kind of understand that. That's number one. Then the next thing that I will do is I will say, okay, well, that may be a solution, but who would oppose this solution? Who would think that there's some, different people got different interests, different things that that they're trying to do all the time. I always ask that question. And I think for me, my job is to reach out to those people. Now, a lot of times I'll ask an advocate, well, have you done that homework? Have you figured it out? But I want it to be successful. So if they have done that, great. If they haven't, then I will reach out to the individuals who I believe would be, key stakeholders to identify it. So with regard to this piece of legislation, Erwin, after you reached out to me and you talked to me about it, I then said, you know what? I need to reach out to the University of Maryland system and get talk to them about this piece of legislation and see where they would be, whether they be against or for it, making sure that College Park understood that it wasn't necessarily like we weren't going to require it for every institution, everything else, because I didn't want them to just automatically sort of be in opposition. I then said, well, you know what? That's not the only stakeholder. I also need to talk to the Maryland Higher Education Commission because they have a central role in this. I had to see where their mindset was on this piece of legislation and the role that they would have. And then I said also, because we're kind of going into the K to 12, I need to meet and talk to the Maryland State Department of Education, which does the K to 12 pieces, and talk to them. And I will share with you that everybody says no first.
Yeah.
And they did too. They also said no. And you got to be willing to compromise, Erwin. And so what happened was, just to be brief on it a little bit, the breakthrough on this, when everybody was saying no, and there was additional homework and things like that, talking to other states and stuff like that. But the breakthrough, Erwin, was with MSDE, who, because we had similar challenges to the one that we had with the top 10%. Not all of our schools do class rank. Different ranks are different and things like that. The breakthrough was they said, well, Senator Augustine, we understand that you're committed to this model. Are you willing to be flexible and allow for us to use the college and career readiness standard that is a part of the blueprint for Maryland's future as a central portion of what would be this program? And I said, absolutely. Of course. I'm not going to be so dogmatic on what I'm trying to do as long as we're still moving forward with exactly what you said, which is letting students know that this opportunity is available to them. And so I said, sure, yeah, let's do that. Try to figure it out. Like, if you want to work that out, you'll help me to bring other people on board by making that sort of like a basis. And so that we use that, which is a central portion of the blueprint for Maryland's future, then let's do that. That brought them to the table. That made them partners. And that's what's required. I mean, you got to be able to build partnerships with folks which then helped once they were all together and once they were with me, that's reassuring to my colleagues, right?
Mhm.
Senate, the Democrats, the Republicans, whomever, because they are going to look to these people who execute on these things for leadership when we're telling them what to do. That's the other thing. Nobody likes to be told what to do, Erwin. Nobody, right? But that's what we do when we pass law. We're telling people what to do. So it's a challenge, right? But that's the method. That's the way. That's what we've done. That's what we did with this piece of legislation. And it's a recurring sort of methodology for getting legislation passed.
Gotcha. And so the way I understand it now, moving forward, it went through three different readings. It passed in both chambers. Governor Moore signed it a couple days ago. And
Well,
so
he
we're,
hasn't signed it yet, but
oh,
we're
he hasn't
hoping
signed it yet.
not
Okay.
yet. Yeah,
When will that happen?
because when that does happen, you'll be invited to come.
Oh,
Okay.
I
Yeah.
love that. Yes,
Yeah.
that's amazing. I
Yeah.
will
So
definitely be there.
absolutely. So there will be potentially it will be signed on the 14th of May, and I think I'm sorry, or when it may be the 12th, whatever that Tuesday is.
Oh, wow.
And then
Okay.
there's another potential signing on the 26th. And those are the two dates that I think that the governor will have an opportunity to sign the legislation. Or if he doesn't sign it, he's got three choices. He can sign it, he can veto it, or he can allow it to go into law without his signature.
Okay.
My expectation is that he will sign it
Okay.
on one of those dates, and you will be invited as one of the key people to make this thing happen to be there when he does that.
Oh, thank you. That's a tremendous honor. I really appreciate that, and I would definitely be there. So I really appreciate that. Um, so let's say he signs it, it becomes law. The bill, the way it's written out, there's going to be like an implementation study, and we're going to see to make sure that we roll this out properly. And I'm always a big fan of it doesn't need to be perfect as long as we're making progress, right? As long as the state is making progress to improve in different avenues of whether education, healthcare, different things. We don't need a silver bullet. It doesn't have to be perfect, but we're making progress. And so tell us a little bit about like what do you want students and families to know about this bill? Like how do you as I shared earlier as well with like myself and like just the I would have loved for someone to proactively notify me or tell me that there's options. What do you want parents and students to walk away with knowing that this is now going to hopefully become law?
It is law, and what we did, Irwin, is we understood that creating this type of program will take time. And so we do have basically a runway for implementation that will allow for basically it to come into effect. I want to say basically, we'll really be getting there in 2027, 2028, and
Okay.
we'll take this time now in order to sort of build it to the point where it will get there. And so it will impact students who are in the eighth grade, in the ninth grade now. That's where we are, presuming that everything stays on schedule, which it may or may not.
Yeah.
We do everything we can in order to be able to do that because it's a number of systems that will be required to be modified and updated in order to be able to do this. But what we did do is we put into the law that is their charge. Like they have the responsibility to get this thing up and running. And so what parents will know, or what parents can know, is that in the coming years, their student, when they are, it's not entirely designed, but that they will be notified. They will receive information that says, if you want to come to Towson, you are admitted. You
Mhm.
are in. And then we're going to make sure that that's how happens in other places as well. Like you have accomplished what you need to accomplish to come to Coppin State University. You have done that. The reason why I mentioned those two is because they also were very helpful for me with the bill because they were already doing some of this. Or when again, you identified the Common App program that was being utilized. I went and did some homework and realized that Coppin State was already using it. And they were just like, yeah, this has been good to us. Why don't we have one inside of our own state? So they will then get that information that says, you've done what you're supposed to do. This is there for you. The Irwin Hess will receive that
Okay.
because we know there are plenty of Irwin Hesses out there who maybe don't have the same drive that you had, which we're grateful for you to have to do that. But why would you have to do that?
Right.
Like, there was no reason to have to do that. You should have known beforehand
Yep.
that this door was an avenue that was available to you. That's what it's going to do for parents. It's going to open that door and it's going to demonstrate, it's going to let the students and the parents know what they need to do up front in order to be able to get their child into college.
Perfect. Again, Senator, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. I'm super excited, and I will definitely be there at the bill signing. So I know Governor Moore signed a ton of bills a couple
He
days
did.
ago, and I didn't know if
Yeah.
that was one of them or not, but I
Yeah.
appreciate that. I will definitely be there. So I
Awesome.
appreciate
Okay,
that.
we'll make sure you're there. Okay.
Thank you.
All
Thank
right.
you. Take care.
Thank you. Bye now.